Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 9 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs. The 5 main topics are as follows. In the first topic, we will try to read about the various social issues being faced by the transgender people and the issues related to the Transgender Protection Act of 2019. In the second topic, we will try to understand what is Article 311 and various ethical issues in the public administration. In the third topic, we will try to read about the various salient features of the National Health Claim Exchange. Followed by the fourth topic, where we will try to inquire about the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha. And finally, in the fifth topic, we will read about the reusable launch vehicle program of ISRO. Towards the end, there will be news snippets especially curated to help you excel in the prelims examination, so stay tuned. The article in today's newspaper highlights the social discrimination being faced by the transgender community and the loopholes which prevails in the Transgender Protection Act of 2019. These issues surrounding the transgender rights forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of social issues and your GS2 paper under the theme of government policies and interventions. Imagine for a second the term transgender in your head. And what is the first image which comes in your mind? Is that an image of transgender people begging at the traffic signal or in the trains? Do not worry, there is nothing wrong with you. You are also the part of the social conditioning-led stigmatization of these people. And that image which you have in your head is the stark reality of the great level of deprivation and discrimination which these transgender people face in their daily life. The question arises here is that who are these transgender people? So if we look at the definition given by the Transgender Protection of Rights Act 2019, it says that any person whose gender doesn't match with the gender which was assigned at birth. So let's say if I am a man, but I have got certain feminine characteristics and my sexual orientation is also aligned with that, then I am a transgender person. According to the Act, it also includes intersex variations, genderqueer, and person having socio-cultural identities. Socio-cultural identities such as Kinnar, Hijra, Aurovani, or Jokta. All of these socio-cultural identities are included in this particular act. If we look at the census 2011's data, there were 4.8 lakh transgender people in our country. And if we look at the National Family Health Survey data 5, this number has increased by 60%. Keep this in mind here that we do not have got any absolute data for these transgender people. Now, what is the level of the socio-economic discrimination which is faced by these transgender people on the daily basis? The first and foremost is obviously the social taboo. The social taboo which emerges because of the lack of sensitization in the larger public about the sexual orientation or the sexual identity of such transgender people, which ultimately translates into intolerance, discrimination, even physical abuse. A classic case of that is of pilot Adam Harry, who was actually refused to fly a commercial flight because he came out as a transgender person, and at the same time he was also taking part of certain sexual therapy for his sex change. Now, because of the existence of such social taboo, it actually leads to inequality and violence being faced by these transgender people, which actually reflects itself on severe derogatory levels. The example of that is the case of Rakshita Mallikarjuna from Karnataka, where the transgender person was not only raped, but when she was actually rescued by the villagers and they were taking her to the police station, she got apprehensive that the police, instead of catching the real culprits, will actually arrest her as the transmitter of certain sexual disease. Now, because of this social taboo, the inequality, the violence, the larger social dogma which revolves around these transgender people, it actually leads to conflicts in family, where children in our Indian society are actually considered as a showpiece to the larger society. But because there exists a prejudice against these transgender people in the larger society, it actually leads to parents shunning their own kids or exercising any kind of physical abuse on them. And all of these issues, it actually accumulates and transcends into these transgender people having identity crisis, where because of such a strong response from the society, such backlash which they are facing at the home, they actually start questioning their own identity. An example of that is the case of Muskan Naj. Muskan Naj, who belongs to Bihar, and she actually lied to her parent and came to Delhi. She lied that she is actually going to Delhi for UPSC preparation. And when she arrived in Delhi, she actually started interacting with other transgender people to understand the body changes which she was facing at such a young age. Now, this Muskan Naj, she is actually working in a multinational company after all the struggles she has faced in the life. So has sky turned rainbow for Muskan Naj? Absolutely not. Because even at workplace, she is facing several kind of discrimination and the issue of glass ceiling. To know more about the issue of glass ceiling, please watch the previous session of the Analyst. Now moving forward, all of these issues, it is obvious that they create severe level of trauma, mental illness and acute depression. And when that person is facing all of this and social ostracization, it actually leads to a self-imposed isolation from the society, which ultimately leads to the economic deprivation. So it is obvious that because of such ostracization, such transgender people will have less access to education. And that less access to education actually translates into low accumulation of any kind of skill. So it is obvious that they have low chances of employment. And because of that, they are forced either to do sex work or to indulge in begging at that traffic signal or in that train, the image which you had in your mind. Also, this economic deprivation itself leads to the roadblock in the gender transitioning, because even if they want to go at a certain sexual transition surgery, these surgeries are really expensive and almost 90 to 95% of the transgender people, they fall into such acute level of economic deprivation that they cannot afford such surgery. You can see from the data itself. As per the data, 92% of India's trans people are unable to participate in any kind of economic activity. Less than half of them have actually access to certain level of education. And 62% of those who have got the chance to educate themselves, they actually face abuse and discrimination at these schools, colleges, coachings, on the roads, at any public places. Because of which, does it not impact our India's economy? It does, because as per the World Bank report, because of homophobia and transphobia, it actually leads to a loss of $32 billion to our India's economy. And because of all of this, even if they want to raise their voice at any public platform, they are unable to do so. The reason being that they are a minority in the electoral democracy. Because we have seen their number, it's around 4.8 lakh. Let's say even if it has increased to 7 to 8 lakh. It is obvious that they cannot create any kind of political pressure on any kind of electorate or government, and thus they cannot demand for any significant reforms. However, the sky actually start turning a bit blue for these transgender people from the year of 2014, when the Supreme Court, in a landmark judgment of Nalsa versus Union of India, actually recognized these transgender people as the third gender, where the Justice K.S. Radhakrishnan actually held that such recognition of third gender is not an issue of a social or a medical condition. Rather, such third gender has to be recognized for their larger human rights. because such non-recognition was actually leading to the of gender identity was actually violating their Article 14, that is their right to equality, and under Article 21 their right to dignified life. Thus, following these lines, the central government it enacted the Transgender Protection Act of 2019, which had got certain salient features. The first was that obviously it did not differentiate it between the transgenders, transsexuals, intersex person or genderqueer. It also prohibited any kind of discrimination against these transgender people in the fields of education, employment, healthcare and public facilities, thus recognizing their rights under Article 15 and Article 16. Now it also provided that if such transgender people they want their identity to be recognized, then they can avail themselves the certificate of identity, which can be given by the district magistrate if they have obtained that their sex is changed or they have assigned or aligned themselves to a particular sex. Also, it said that any kind of government welfare measures and provisions of healthcare, including the HIV surveillance centers, all of them will be available to the transgender people. And it provided for the setting up of a national council for transgender person. Keep this in mind that the rights of these transgender people as the part of the larger human right is also included in the UN Yogyakarta principle of 2006. Very recently, we also made a significant change where these third gender or the transgender people were allowed to vote under their third gender in the voting cards of the recently held 18th Lok Sabha election. Following these affirmative action, the Karnataka, it is the only state in our country which actually provides for 1% horizontal reservation for these transgender people in the civil services employment. Also, the government has created a national portal for the transgender person where these transgender people they can go online and they can digitally avail themselves any kind of certificate or registration which they seek to. Thus, it can actually reduce the exposure of social stigma or social discrimination which they face. At the same time, the Ministry of Social Justice has launched Garima Greh, where it is providing shelter homes for these transgender people. And the target is that at least minimum of 25 transgender people will be provided shelter under one home. Also, the Ministry of Home Affairs in the year of 2022, it try to protect the privacy and the dignity of these transgender people in the Indian prison, because under the Indian Prison Act of 1894, any such category of a third gender was not included. So if there was a prison inmate, either male or boy, or either male or woman, that person had to go into the same prison, and thus it ultimately violated their dignity or right to dignified life. Also, if you look at the Legal Services Authority, it provides free legal aid to these transgender people, and if they have income up to 2 lakh rupees, up to 2 lakh of annual income. Also, several corporate sector has taken various kind of affirmative actions. For example, if we look at the Brain and Company, so they have started recruiting and retention of such transgender people. So that is also one of the affirmative action which is being taken by the private sector of our country. Now, on the basis of this information, try to solve this prelims question of 2020, where it asks that the free legal services is provided to which of the following category of the people. I am sure that you will be able to address one option very easily. Comment your answers in the comment box and we move forward to talk about the issues which persist in the Transgender Protection of Rights Act of 2019. On which the article is actually surrounded upon. The first issue is that it says or provides for no self-determination. What does it mean? It basically means that the act says that it mandates the proof of surgery or any kind of hormone treatment before providing for gender change certificate. So see, read here clearly. If I am a transgender, and I have not gone for any sex reassignment surgery, then I can only be identified as a transgender and not the sexual orientation which I have personally. So I will not be identified as a male or female. I will still be identified as a transgender person unless and until I have gone through some surgery and I have changed my identity. Now, as we were discussing, that it is obvious that I am not financially capable to perform such surgery. So it is obvious that now I will not get any identity certification under this act. Then when the NALSA judgment was passed in the year 2014, the major ground of that was to provide certain reservation to these transgender people. So even if the act has provided for prohibition against the discrimination, it has not provided for any kind of reservation to these people, the kind of reservation which is provided to other backward classes. At the same time, there exists less punishment for sexual abuse committed against the transgender woman. So if you commit any kind of sexual abuse against a cisgender woman, you will be charged for at least 7 years. But the same provision is actually less for a transgender woman, thus clearly violating their right to equality and equal protection of law under Article 14 of the Constitution. Then, as we were discussing, that the economic resources with these transgender people, they are meager and low. At the same time, instead of creating certain alternative sources of employment for these people, the act has actually criminalized the begging. And there exists a kind of a gharanas, the kind of gurus which run certain institutions to help these transgender people. The act has further criminalized such traditional gharanas, such traditional hijra livelihoods. Also, if you look at the provisions of the act, it actually violates the freedom of residence which is provided under Article 19 of the Constitution. Because the act says that such transgender person either shall live in some government provided home such as Garima Greh, or that transgender person shall live with his or her parents. The person does not have freedom of occupancy rights provided under the act. So it basically violates their freedom of residence provided under the Article 19 of the Constitution. So what can be the measures which can be adopted to improve the condition of these transgender people in our country? The first is to put impetus on medical research. So we shall provide for free and safe sex transitioning surgeries, and that we can actually include in the provision of Ayushman Bharat. The second is that there shall be a prohibition on the intake of any recreational drugs for the gender affirmation, at least without any advice of the doctors, because such recreational drugs are actually hampering the health of such transgender people and also leading to a lot of HIV and sexually transmitted disease in these people. The third is to promote the civil society organizations who are actually publicly mobilizing these transgender community, who are working with the state governments, the central governments, to bring these transgender people at the larger public platform. The fourth step can be to create inclusive policies, to create and implement. Non-implementation of such inclusive policy, a great example of that is the Surrogacy Regulation Act of 2021. So let's say if me and you, we are a transgender couple and we want to avail a child through surrogacy. Can we do that under Surrogacy Regulation Act of 2021? Absolutely not. So these are the kind of the non-inclusive policies which has been created by the government. So we need to change this structure, and further sensitization of the public officials is also required. Then obviously to address their social concerns, to provide them education under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, to provide them health care, let's say under Ayushman Bharat. So all these social concerns shall be addressed, as low as creating the public toilets for such transgender people, because any public toilet you will access to, it will be only for male and female. The last is to create social engineering, to further sensitize the larger mass, to make them understand that these transgender people are part and parcel of our society and they also have the rights under Article 14 and 19 and 21 of the Constitution. Then when we look at the corporate sector, we can make the hiring process much more inclusive. Also, we can create pride groups, gender neutral restrooms can be created, So all these steps shall be implemented. On the line of these discussion, try to solve this question, write it down. If possible, comment your answer in the comment box. We move forward to the next news. The Jammu and Kashmir administration has dismissed 4 employees from the government services on the allegations of being them a threat to the security of the state. Such dismissal has been done under the provisions of Article 311 of the Constitution, and it also raises the question on the accountability of such public servants. This forms an important component of your GS4 paper under the theme of accountability and the ethical governance. Let's first try to understand what are the provisions of Article 311. So Article 312, it provides and creates all India services to provide a uniform administration for the country. The Article 311 on the other hand, it actually deals with the dismissal of a person who is a member of civil services. Now there is a specific clause, clause 2 of Article 311, which says that government can actually dismiss an employee without ordering any kind of inquiry or providing that civil servant a chance to express his concern or to present his stand. So if there comes any kind of such circumstances where you have violated such a law or you have compromised the security of the state, then under the clause 2 of the Article 311, the government can straightforward dismiss you without providing you any chance of hearing. So when we have understood the Article 311, it also highlights that how there is a rising issue of lack of ethics in the public administration. A great demonstration of that was actually done in the book called as No Trumpets or Bugles, a book which was actually written by a former civil servant called as J.B. D'Souza. So he writes that nowadays the public servants, they have actually started developing a helicopter approach. A helicopter approach where they have actually become non-reflective of any ground reality. So they are surrounded with so much yes-manship all the time that they have actually stopped adhering or catering to the need of the common people. You guys might have heard about that how very recently there was a bank manager, and that bank manager actually called an old woman who was 100 years old to the bank to physically verify her Jan Dhan account. This is the great example of lack of empathy or a helicopter approach being developed by such public servants. The second issue is that they start developing me, myself and I attitude, where their own personal interest, it start taking primacy over the obligations of their duties. So they start creating this issue that every services or every benefits which is being provided by the government, they are entitled to do that. And the great example of that is, if you guys might have heard this astonishing case where there was an IS couple, and that IS couple actually used to vacate a stadium. Can any one of you guess what was the reason for that? That reason for that was the important walk of their dog in the evening. However, the IS couples has been taken a voluntary retirement or maybe they have been suspended. The third is the reluctance to accept their participatory role. So now after the enactment of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, we have got a decentralized form of government. However, the bureaucracy is still mired with the red tapeism and they are reluctant to accept their new participatory role instead of their harbinger role of policy implementation. The fourth is obviously the new policy driver approach which they have, in which they actually indulge themselves into creating new policies instead of implementing the already existent policies such as Swachh Bharat Mission, Smart City Mission, all of that. And there are certain ethical issues which are involved when it comes to the conduct of public administrators. The first is obviously the personal cost ethical dilemma. The personal cost is that they can actually injure the value relationship. So let's say for example a minister calls you and tells you that there is some corruption is taking place at the ground level. You are like, yes sir, what I can do? That minister tells you that, you take 10% share, transfer 25% to me. Now, even if your personal values are honest, integrity, you do not want to indulge in such cases, but even then you will not want to injure your relationship with the minister, and you will become the part of the corruption. The second is the right versus the right ethical dilemma, where there is a responsibility as well as the oath of secrecy. So let's say there is a corruption which is actually taking place in my department. My personal value is to be honest. I want to walk on the lines of Mahatma Gandhi. So now I want to disclose this corruption which is taking place, but at the same time I have also taken the oath of secrecy under the Civil Services Conduct Rules of 1964. So I am unable to do that because now there is a conflict between my duty and my personal ethics. The third is the conjoint ethical dilemma between the transparency which can actually harm a relationship. So if I can come out in public, if I can disclose such information, then there is another bigger issue of the lack of accountability, where we can also already see it from the example of the news, where these people, these officers, they actually compromise our national security. And what are the causes of such increasing lack of accountability? The first is obvious, the excessive security of tenure which is provided under Article 311 of the Constitution, which actually kinds of creates a blanket of security. So let's say even if you have indulged in the corruption, what is the maximum amount of punishment which you will get? That can either be suspension, or you will get a punishment posting at Mizoram or Manipur. Your services will be still intact. The second is the excessive corruption which is taking place in our country. As Mahatma Gandhi very rightfully said, that in this world we have got enough for every man's need, but not enough for one man's greed. And the growing corruption is also reflected in the Corruption Perception Index of 2022, where India had an abysmal ranking of 85th. Then there is obviously the issue of misuse of discretionary power, as we saw from the example of that IS couple. The fourth is the lack of ethical literacy, because we just moved away from the ancient dictum of the value-based education system which we used to have. For example, if we look at Earth Shastra, there used to exist a concept called as Raj Rishi, where a Raja or an administrator had to necessarily have the values of a Rishi who has denounced the world, who does not have got any material interest, and now he is actually striving to work for the upliftment of the larger public. Then there is obviously the official secrecy, as we were discussing. Under the Right to Information Act, there is a clause 8. The clause 8 which prevents the sharing of certain necessary information. Then there is obviously the Civil Services Conduct Rules of 1964. Obviously, the political patronage and interference plays a very important role. Then the poor implementation of a Whistleblower Protection Act 2014 is also a very important issue, because even if we want to raise our voice against the injustice, there are so many hardships which we are going to face that many people are actually not capable of that. Even if they do, for example, so did the Satyendra Dubey, who was an Indian Engineering Services officer, and he tried to disclose the corruption which was taking place in the Golden Quadrilateral Highway project, and he was allegedly killed for raising his voices. Then there is obviously the absence of grievance redressal mechanism. So let's say, for example, you go to the passport office and your passport application is rejected on any superficial level by the passport officer. Now there is no complaint authority which exists there where you can go and actually complain against that officer. Your file will actually keep on circulating from one desk to another unless and until you actually decide to pay some money. That is the harsh reality. The fourth is the lack of citizen charter. What is citizen charter? Citizen charter is basically a document which is provided by the government, where the government actually lists down the promises or the standard of services which is going to provide to the citizen. As per the data by the parliamentary committees, there exist only 20 to 30% of the ministries in our country which have actually released the citizen charter. An important ministry such as Ministry of Home Affairs has not released yet. Then there is obviously the compromisation of the national security, as we can see from the recent example, that shows the high level of corruption infiltration in our country. So what can be the method to actually enforce accountability? The first is obviously the moral value based education, such as also directed under the National Education Policy of 2020, where the moral values such as honesty, impartiality, integrity, all that shall be inculcated in the human beings from the very bringing itself. The second is the promotion of transparency. So how we can do that? By strengthening the Right to Information Act of 2005, by creating or providing more impetus on the e-governance mechanism, by actually strengthening the social media. Then we can also create or strengthen the vigilance mechanism. The vigilance mechanism such as Enforcement Directorate, CBI, Intelligence Bureau, RAW, all of that shall be strengthened. The parallel of that we can see from the medieval history as well. So for example, earlier times there used to be officers such as Munhits and Barits. They used to act as a spy against the government officer to see that if they are not indulging into any kind of corruption activity against the state. Then an internal auditing system can be created to ensure the value of financial propriety, as it has been adopted by the IMF's ethics office. Have you guys heard about any ethics office which exists in our country, in any company or in any public department? The fourth is the e-governance mechanism. So e-governance mechanisms such as proactive governance and timely implementation or Pragati can be implemented. To do what? To monitor and review the ongoing projects, to address the grievances of the people, and to further ensure the spirit of cooperative federalism. Then we need to actually indulge in the capacity building of the stakeholders. Who are these stakeholders? The stakeholders such as civil society organization, any kind of NGOs, your press. The freedom of press is also important because it acts as the pillar of democracy. So for example, you guys might have heard about a civil society organization called as Association for Democratic Reforms recently in the news, where it actually filed a petition in the Supreme Court and it forced the Election Commission of India to release the voting count data under the Form 17C. Also, we can actually use artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, so for example, let's say if there is a traffic person and there is a car of member of parliament or MLA is going on. As a person, you will just salute the car even if it is violating the traffic rules. But if on your place there is an artificial intelligence based camera, then that camera will actually track the numbers of the cars of MPs as well and provide for challan. So we can smartly use the technology for that purpose as well. On the basis of this discussion, try to solve this particular question. Comment your answers. We move forward to the next news. Health Ministry and the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India (IRDAI) has launched the National Health Claim Exchange platform to bring together the insurance companies, the healthcare service sector providers at a one digital platform. This new platform, which has been launched by the Ministry of Health Affairs, it forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies in the health sector. So let's first try to understand what are the challenges which exist in the insurance sector of our country, which this platform wants to tackle. The first challenge is the biggest, and that is the insurance gap which exists in our country. So for example, if we look at the insurance penetration, what is insurance penetration? It is basically the total amount of insurance premium divided by the total GDP of the country. What is premium here? Premium here is basically the amount you pay to avail any kind of insurance facility, let's say life insurance. So the total amount of insurance premium which has been paid divided by the GDP, that exists only 4%. Now if we compare ourselves internationally, then we will realize that for USA such insurance penetration is 11.6, and even if we look at the global average, it is 6.8, while we are at a meager low of 4%. Then when it comes to the insurance density, what is insurance density now? It is basically the total amount of premium which has been paid, again divided now by the population. So here basically we calculate the premium per capita. The premium per capita for our country in the year of 2023, it exists at 92 US dollars. However, if you look again internationally, for USA it is $8,885. The global average is $853 and we are at an abysmal low of 92 US dollar. Then when we look at the health insurance share in the total premium, that is 29%. At the same time, there also exists a lot of public sector domination when it comes to our insurance sector. So the today's newspaper itself highlights that when we look at the urban area, the inpatient care, it is highest for the government funded scheme. So every 60 out of 1 lakh cases is for the people who have actually availed some kind of government funded insurance facility. However, in the rural areas, if we look at the same data, then the inpatient care is highest for the private insurers. The people who have actually availed some kind of private insurance facility, and that is around 73.5 cases per 1 lakh. So does that mean that the out of pocket expenditure of these people in the rural areas is actually high than urban areas? Absolutely, especially when it comes to the insurance facility, availing of that. Then there also exists a large rural urban divide. So till now, let's say even if we follow the Niti Aayog's report, around 30% of the population is the which lives in urban areas. So our 70% of the population still resides in rural area. That means around 80 to 90 crore people are living in the rural areas, and only 8 to 10% of them have got any kind of insurance facility. So just look at the low insurance penetration which comes especially in the rural areas. Then there exists, as highlighted by the today's report, a lack of coordination between the hospitals and the insurance companies. So let's say what happens that I go to a hospital and I do my checkup, right? So in my checkup, 25 to 26 diseases are tracked, that whether I have got them or not. Let's say I have got 1 or 2 out of them. Now I require this report to submit to the insurance company to avail a life insurance policy. Whatever the premium which I am going to get is going to be decided on the basis of how many diseases I have. But at the same time, these insurance companies, first of all, they are going to refuse that, okay, you have got this data from some private hospital. We are not going to rely on that data. The second it happens is that there is a lack of coordination in the sense that a lot of time actually takes for processing and passing of such data. Now, because of this lack of coordination, the out-of-pocket expenditure of a person is increasing to avail these kind of two-way facility. And at the same time, many a times people are not actually able to realize the actual value of premium which they deserve. To tackle with all these issues, the government came up with the National Health Claim Exchange, which is going to act as a digital platform, where it is going to bring on one platform your insurance company, your healthcare sector service providers, and the administrators of such insurance policy. It will act as a gateway to exchange the claims related information. So see, look in the diagram here. This is the normal claim procedure which works. So here you are as an insured person, you go for a medical treatment to the doctor. The doctor then provides you certain data that will lead to your medical insurance of the by the government. And auditing will take place here, the assessment will take place here. But what if all these functions, which obviously looks very complex, can be done on a single platform where there is a kind of data interoperability, and that will actually reduce the time for you, make the process much more streamlined. That is exactly what will be availed through National Health Claim Exchange. Here, a cashless claims can also be availed within the 3 hours of the receipt of the discharge authorization by the hospitals. At the same time, to further promote the digitization of the public health records, the National Health Authority has actually come up with the Digital Health Incentive Scheme, where on every claim which will be settled, 500 rupees or 10% of the total claim amount, keep this in mind, whichever is lower here will be provided to the hospital. So keep here from the parents' perspective 2 important things in mind. One is 500 rupees per claim or 10% of the claim amount, whichever is lower, and it will be provided to the hospital, not to the patient. Now, what are the benefits of such National Health Claim Exchange platform? The first is obviously the seamless interoperability of the health claim processing which can be take place now. The second is the efficiency and the transparency in the insurance auditing. The third is that it will actually reduce the operation cost as well, right, for the hospitals, for the insurance service providers. So the operation cost will be reducing, and at the same time the out of pocket expenditure, which is around 60% average for our country, that will reduce as well. And all these objectives will actually transcend into IRDI fulfilling its objective of providing insurance for all by the year of 2047, which is aligned with the idea of Viksit Bharat. And all these steps will also help us to implement the Sustainable Development Target of 2. Keep these important provisions in your mind, and we move forward to the next news. With Indian National Congress emerging as the principal opposition party in the 18th Lok Sabha election, chances are that the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha will actually come from the Congress party. So that has brought the leader of opposition into the forefront of the news, which we are going to cover from the perspective of the prelims under the section of polity. First of all, let's ask ourselves a question. What is actually the importance of leader of opposition? So we have got the Prime Minister who is going to act as the head of the government. We have got the President who is going to act as the head of state. What role does play the leader of opposition? The first and foremost is that it creates a strong opposition. Why such a strong opposition is actually required? Because if a government is in majority, let's say if it has got more than 272 plus seats, then it can actually pass majority of the bills. What if it passes such a bill which is actually hampering or violating the rights of a certain people? So at that stage, you actually need a strong opposition which can raise your voice of concern in the parliament. The second is that it creates a checks and balances process, especially in the legislative procedures. So this strong opposition led by a leader of opposition can actually bring certain important motions such as your censor motion, your no confidence motion, and all of that can actually checks the parliament functioning to keep them under the control. The third is that it can decide for their accountability by asking them for the no confidence motion. The fourth is that remember that in India we have the parliamentary form of government. So parliamentary form of government, is it stable? No, because it can be changed, right, from the no confidence motion being passed. Now if a no confidence motion is being passed, then there is already an opposition and the leader of opposition which can act as the next prime minister, and thus there is a ready-made alternative government which is already there. So that can form the government and there is no need or requirement of the frequent elections. The second is that it can provide the criticism of the undue or unjust policies which is being passed by the majority government. And it can create an institution of transparency. Keep this in mind that because leader of opposition plays such important function, that is why if you look at the order of precedence, the first is obviously the president, the second is the vice president, the third is prime minister, then there is governor of all the respective states, the fourth is the former president or the deputy prime minister, then there is Chief Justice of India or the Speaker of Lok Sabha. Then this order of precedence, the leader of opposition is equivalent to a cabinet minister. So keep this order of precedence in your mind as well. At the same time, such leader of opposition is also part of some important committees such as your Public Accounts Committee, your Public Undertaking Committee, and the Estimate Committee, the three important financial committees which we have in the parliament. And it also forms an important component of certain important committees, the selection for that, such as your Chief Vigilance Commissioner, Central Information Commissioner, the head of CBI, the chairman of National Human Rights Council, and Lokpal as well. So now let's try to understand what is exactly the position of such leader of opposition. As defined under the salaries and the allowances of leader of opposition in the Parliament Act of 1977, such leader of opposition is a prominent political figure who is either the leader of the largest party after the party which is in the ruling or which is in the coalition of the ruling. So after that, the largest party which has got the highest number of seats. So he is either the leader of the largest party or the leader of such coalition which has been formed as an opposition. Now keep this in mind that if such position of leader of opposition has been provided under the act, then we can say that it has got a statutory recognition. It has nowhere mentioned in the constitution at all. Now there was a debate. The debate was that whether the party which has got at least 10% of seat, so the leader of that party will become the leader of opposition, or any largest opposition party, the leader of that party can become the LOP. So try to understand this, why the party with at least 10% of seat has been involved in the debate here, because that forms the quorum. Quorum is basically the minimum strength of the member which is required in the parliament to conduct or transact any business. So either a person who comes from such a party or comes from a party which has got the largest number of seats. Remember that the Act of 1977, it does not include any requirement, and that is why if we look at the 17th Lok Sabha, then earlier Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary was elected as the leader of opposition. He came from the INC, Indian National Congress. Indian National Congress at that time was the largest opposition party with 52 seats. However, the quorum in the parliament is 55, right? 10% of 550 seats, that is 55. So even though the Congress did not fulfill the quorum, it was still the largest opposition party, and that is why Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary was elected from INC. Also keep this in mind that even though such statutory recognition was provided in the year of 1977, the first leader of opposition in Lok Sabha was selected in 1969 itself, before the statutory recognition, and his name was Ram Subhag Singh, who came from the Congress opposition, which was formed as a faction within the Indian National Congress, which were opposing the faction of Indira Gandhi. So keep these important things in your mind for the prelims examination. We move forward to the next news. The Indian Space and Research Organization is going to carry out the third and the final launch of reusable launch vehicle called as RLV-LX, or the landing experiment, which forms an important component of your prelims paper under the larger theme of space and technology. So let's first try to understand what exactly is a reusable launch vehicle, also called as Pushpak. As you guys can see here, it is basically a rocket. So if I have to launch a satellite in the space, I am going to be required of a rocket. The rocket which is actually going to provide a trajectory and the speed to this satellite, and then this rocket just becomes completely redundant or of no use. What if we start actually reusing these rockets again and again? Will that lead to actually significantly cut down the cost of the project? That is exactly what ISRO is trying as well, where it has created such rocket with state-of-art technologies such as accurate navigation system, Ka-band radar altimeter, your NAVIC receiver, as well as brake parachute system, which is basically an unmanned winged prototype rocket which can be reused again. How we are going to do that? Just look here. So this rocket is going to take the satellite and it is going to launch the satellite into the space. Then at 100 km there will be a separation phase between this rocket and the satellite, and then a descent phase will come, a re-entry, and finally an aerodynamic mode and the splashdown. This unmanned wing prototype Pushpak has been designed by the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, which is at Thumba, Kerala, the exact place from where India's first rocket was launched in the year of 1963. Now this Pushpak woman will be launched from the designated height of 4.5 km, where it will be taken by the Chinook helicopters, and then it will drop and it will aim to create a safe landing. How it will do that? By maneuvering by the cross range or down range to do the altitude correction, and ultimately the major target is to cut down the descent rate or the falling rate to reduce the impact load. Now, when this third stage is completed, the ISRO is ultimately going to target for unmanned orbital re-entry vehicle, which will be around 1.6 times the size of Pushpak, and that will be launched at the height of 400 km, and the carrier will be a geosynchronous launch vehicle. Now, see, when we are launching a conventional rocket, it actually cost us $5,000 to put 1 kg of payload, 1 kg of satellite. Now, if you are going to use such a reusable rocket, it is actually going to cut down the cost to $500 per kg of payload. So it is obvious that it will cut down the cost of the space mission. We can also use it in advanced technologies such as your hypersonic or ballistic missiles, and it can also actually increase India's share in the global space launch market as well. So keep these important facts in your mind for the prelims examination. We move forward to the next segment, where we are going to cover some important news which will help you to eliminate some important statements in your prelims examination. And the first news is about a very interesting species, that is greater adjutant stork, which is also called as Garud. Now, once the habitat of this Garud or adjutant stork used to be the whole of South and Southeast Asia. But now currently their habitat is shrink down to only 3 breeding grounds known in the world. One is in Cambodia and 2 is in India, that is Bihar and Assam. In the state of Assam, they are majorly found along the Brahmaputra Valley, especially in the regions of Guwahati, Morigaon and Nagaon. Also in the Dipor Beel Wildlife Sanctuary, which is in Assam, which is also a very important Ramsar site. And this population, they are facing major threat. What are the reasons? The first is that these adjutant storks, they are dependent on wetlands and tall trees for nesting. However, because of deforestation, rapid urbanization, they are facing habitat loss. Also because of overfishing and drainage projects which are taking place, it is actually deriving them from their food. Now, when we talk about food, these adjutant storks, they are majorly carnivorous. So basically, they take the parts of flesh to fetch their kids. And if that flesh is fall on the ground, that can actually lead to strong odor, and that is why people, they are just shooing them away or just trying to attack them. Now, these greater adjutant storks, they are protected under the endangered list of the International Union for Conservation of Nature and on the Schedule 4 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. With this, we move forward to the next news where we are going to talk about the Competition Commission of India's recent regulation related to big technological companies, where it has said that it is going to appoint the range of independent agencies to regulate such big technological companies, such as with the firms, management consultancies and chartered accountants as well. Then these agencies will actually have the responsibility to monitor the implementation of whatever the order which will be passed by the Competition Commission of India. And to ensure the integrity and impartiality in such big technological companies, these agencies shall disclose if they have any conflict of interest. Also, the Competition Commission of India has got the power to suspend or terminate any engagement of agencies if the revocation cannot be challenged in any court of law. So even if CCI is going to suspend any engagement with the agencies, these agencies cannot go to the court of law. The last is that the financial burden. So CCI has just put away itself from any kind of financial burden, where it has said that the parties who will seek the settlement from these agencies, they will pay for the services. The next news is about the Consumer Confidence Service, which is a bi-monthly survey released by the Reserve Bank of India, where actually a kind of an interview is done of the urban consumers. Keep this in mind, only of the urban consumers, which is conducted in 19 major cities, and this time 5,943 urban households were considered, where there are certain parameters that what is their confidence on economy, on employment, on price rise, their income and their spending. This time, out of total respondents, more than 50% were female. So on the basis of that, there are two indices which we derive. The first is the current situation index, where if you look at the data of the March, it was around 98.5. So that was increasing, but now it has actually come down in the month of May. So if there is expansion, it shows optimism. If there is a decline, it actually shows pessimism among the customers. Customers of which region? Only urban region. Then there is a future expectation index. So in the month of March, it is 125.2. Again, that has declined as well to 124.8. So keep this consumer confidence survey released by Reserve Bank of India very dear to you. We in the last segment is going to talk about Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. Keeping all the controversies aside, we will only focus on the aspects which can be asked as a question in the prelims examination. So Vinayak Damodar Savarkar formed Mitra Mela as a revolutionary secret society in the year of 1899, which ultimately transformed itself into Abhinav Bharat in the 1904. And played a very important role in the rise of extremism and underground revolutionary activity which was taking parallelly with the Swadeshi movement which was going on. Then in 1906, inspired by Mazzini, who led to the unification of Italy, he wrote Mazzini Charitra. Then in 1906, he went to London, where he started staying in India House, which was also acted as a source of underground activity, and this India House was formed by Shyamji Krishna Verma. Then in 1909, he wrote the very famous book Indian War of Independence, where he held that the revolt of 1857 was the first war of independence by the Indians. In 1910, he was trialed under the Nasik conspiracy case and jailed in the Andaman and Nicobar cellular jail, from where he was actually released in the year of 1924 and then was under house arrest till 1937, after which he emerged as the leader of Hindu Mahasabha. During the World War II, he was the president of Hindu Mahasabha, the World War II which started from 1st of September 1939. Where the Hindu Mahasabha under his leadership formed an alliance government with the Muslim League in the regions of Sindh, Northwest Frontier Province and Bengal, and against or opposition to the Quit India movement which was launched by the Indian National Congress, he wrote Stick to Your Posts. So these are certain important aspects related to V.D. Savarkar. Keep these things in your mind, and we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.